Michael Okafor never expected to receive an invitation to the wedding of the woman who once shattered his heart. Cynthia had abandoned him for a richer man, claiming he wasn't ambitious enough. Now, years later, he was a self-made millionaire, more successful than she ever imagined. But instead of ignoring the insult, he decided to attend, with a date no one would see coming. A homeless woman, Amaka. What started as a simple act of defiance would turn into a night no one would ever forget. Because when Amaka stepped into that wedding, she didn't just turn heads, she changed everything. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more teachable and inspiring folk tales by FE. Michael Okafor sat in his office staring at the elegant white invitation card on his desk. The gold-embossed letters spelled out the name he once thought would be his wife, Cynthia. She was getting married, not to him, but to another man. The man she had chosen over him years ago. A bitter smile formed on his lips as he leaned back in his chair. He shouldn't care. He had moved on, or at least that was what he told himself. Years ago, Michael had been nothing more than an ambitious young man trying to build his dreams. He had loved Cynthia with every fibre of his being, believing they would conquer the world together. But she had other plans. She wanted comfort, luxury, and security, things Michael couldn't offer at the time. So, when an older businessman with deep pockets came into the picture, Cynthia didn't hesitate. She left Michael without a second thought, telling him, "Love isn't enough, Michael. I can't suffer in the name of love." That moment had broken something inside him. He had begged, pleaded, and even tried to prove his worth, but Cynthia had been firm in her decision. She wanted a man who had already made it, not one who was still struggling to get there. The breakup had been the turning point of his life. Michael buried himself in work, vowing never to let himself be seen as not good enough again. His determination paid off. Years of hard work turned into success. He built a thriving business empire, made smart investments, and became one of the most sought-after young entrepreneurs in Lagos. Now he had everything Cynthia once claimed he lacked: wealth, influence, and status. But it seemed none of it mattered because, despite everything, she had still gone ahead and chosen someone else. The invitation card in his hand felt like a slap in the face. Why had she even sent it? Was she trying to show off? Remind him of what he had lost? Or was it her way of rubbing salt into an old wound? He had half a mind to toss it into the trash, but something stopped him. A part of him wanted to see her again, to look her in the eyes and let her know she had given up on the wrong man. Michael's phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from his personal assistant reminding him of an upcoming business meeting. He grabbed his car keys and stepped out of his office, shoving the wedding invitation into his pocket. He wasn't sure what he would do with it yet, but one thing was certain. If he decided to attend, he wouldn't go alone. Michael sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel as he stared at the city traffic ahead. His mind wasn't on the road or the business meeting he was supposed to be attending. It was on the wedding invitation sitting on the passenger seat beside him. The more he thought about it, the more unsettled he felt. A part of him wanted to ignore it, to throw it away and act as if it never arrived. After all, he had nothing to prove to Cynthia. He had moved on, hadn't he? But another part of him wasn't so sure. Cynthia had been a significant part of his past. She wasn't just any ex. She was the woman he had once planned his future with. She had seen him at his lowest and decided he wasn't worth the wait. Now she was marrying someone who fit the image of success she had always craved. Did he really want to sit back and let her believe she had made the right choice? He exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. Was he being petty? Would showing up make him look like a man still hung up on his past? He didn't want to appear desperate or bitter. If he was going to attend, it had to be for the right reasons. Not to beg for her attention, not to start unnecessary drama, but to remind her, no, to remind himself that he was no longer the man she had walked away from. Curiosity gnawed at him. He wanted to see Cynthia again, to look her in the eyes and gauge her reaction when she saw what she had given up. Would she feel regret? Would she second-guess her choices? Or would she simply smile and pretend their history never mattered? Michael tapped his fingers against the steering wheel, deep in thought. He knew he couldn't walk into that wedding alone. That would make it seem like he had been nursing heartbreak all these years. No, if he was going, he needed to make a statement. He needed to show up with someone who would turn heads, someone who would make Cynthia wonder if she had truly made the right decision. A slow smirk formed on his lips. If he was going to do this, he was going to do it right. He didn't just want to attend the wedding. He wanted to make an entrance that no one would forget. Michael drove through the busy streets of Lagos, his mind still occupied with thoughts of Cynthia's wedding. He barely paid attention to the noise of honking cars, the street hawkers weaving between vehicles, or the pedestrians hurrying along the sidewalks. His business meeting was the last thing on his mind. He was still debating whether attending the wedding was worth it when something unusual caught his eye. Near the bridge leading to Victoria Island, he noticed a woman sitting on the pavement. She was hunched over, her arms wrapped tightly around her thin body, as if trying to shield herself from the world. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her feet bare and covered in dust. In front of her was a small plastic bag containing a piece of bread, which she was nibbling on slowly, as if trying to make it last. Michael had seen homeless people before, but there was something different about her. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, her posture suggesting she hadn't always lived like this. Or maybe it was her eyes, dark and weary, yet filled with something deeper than just hunger. The traffic light turned red, forcing him to stop a few meters from where she sat. He watched as a few people walked past her, some throwing quick glances of pity, others ignoring her completely. A group of teenagers passed by, laughing loudly. One of them tossed an empty can at her feet before they disappeared down the street. She flinched slightly but didn't react beyond that. Without thinking, Michael turned on his hazard lights, pulled over, and stepped out of his car. He wasn't sure what he was doing, only that something inside him told him not to drive away. As he approached, the woman looked up at him cautiously. Up close, he could see how frail she was. Her cheekbones were prominent, her lips cracked from dehydration. Despite that, she had a striking face, the kind that hinted at a past life that had once been better. "Are you hungry?" he asked. She hesitated before nodding slowly. Michael glanced around and spotted a small roadside restaurant nearby. Without waiting for her response, he gestured for her to follow him. She hesitated again, as if uncertain whether to trust him, but eventually rose to her feet. He noticed how weak her movements were, as though she hadn't eaten properly in days. Inside the restaurant, he ordered a full plate of rice, plantain, and grilled chicken, along with a bottle of water. When the food arrived, she stared at it for a moment before picking up the spoon and eating in small, careful bites. "What's your name?" he asked. "Amaka," she said, her voice hoarse from lack of use. "Amaka," he repeated. "How did you end up here?" She paused, her fingers tightening around the spoon. It was clear she wasn't used to talking about herself. But after a long silence, she finally spoke. "I wasn't always like this," she said quietly. "I had a home, a family. But life doesn't always go the way we expect." Michael waited, letting her take her time. "My father was a businessman," she continued. "Not rich, but comfortable. He took care of us. Then he fell sick and everything changed. The hospital bills drained our savings. When he died, my mother couldn't handle it. She left, abandoned me. I had no one. I tried to survive, but Lagos isn't kind to people like me." Michael listened, his mind piecing together the picture of a girl who had been forced to fend for herself in a city that swallowed the weak. "No relatives?" he asked. She shook her head. "If they exist, they never looked for me." She finished the last of her food and placed the spoon down gently, as if afraid to seem ungrateful. Michael leaned back in his chair, studying her. He had expected a typical story, one of recklessness, bad decisions, but hers was different. She had been thrown into a life she never chose. An idea began forming in his mind, something wild, something completely unexpected. "What if I told you," he said slowly, "that I could change your life?" Amaka stared at Michael, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Change her life? What did that even mean? She had met enough people who made empty promises, people who threw around words they didn't mean. But something about the way he looked at her made her pause. There was no pity in his eyes, just a strange kind of determination. Michael leaned forward slightly, still studying her. The idea forming in his mind was risky, but the more he thought about it, the more convinced he became. He had wanted to make a statement at Cynthia's wedding, to prove that he was no longer the man she had looked down on. But now it wasn't just about that. It was about something bigger. "I have an event to attend," he said finally, "and I need a date." Amaka blinked, waiting for the punchline. Michael didn't smile. "I want you to come with me." She let out a short, dry laugh. "Me?" "Yes, you." She looked down at herself, at the faded, oversized shirt hanging off her thin frame, at her hands still rough from sleeping on the streets. "You must be joking." "I'm not." Her eyes narrowed. "Why would you take someone like me to an event? What's your game?" Michael sighed. He had expected this reaction. "No game. No hidden agenda. Just think of it as an opportunity. A chance to step into a different world, even if it's just for one night." She shook her head. "People don't just do things like this, especially not for someone like me." Michael could understand her skepticism. Life had taught her not to trust easily, but he wasn't offering this out of pity. There was something about her, something raw, unfiltered. She had lived through struggles most people couldn't even imagine. And right now she represented everything opposite to Cynthia and the world she belonged to. "I know it sounds crazy," he admitted, "but what do you have to lose?" Amaka frowned, considering his words. She had nothing. No home, no job, no future. A few hours ago, she had been trying to make a single piece of bread last the whole day. Now a stranger was offering her a chance to step into luxury, even if just for one night. It didn't make sense, but then again, nothing in her life had made sense for a long time. "What kind of event is this?" she asked cautiously. Michael hesitated for a second before answering. "A wedding." She raised an eyebrow. "Whose wedding?" He exhaled. "My ex-fiancée's." Amaka sat back, crossing her arms. "Now I get it. You want to make her jealous. That's what this is really about, isn't it?" Michael didn't deny it. "Maybe a little," she smirked, shaking her head. "So you want to use me to make a point?" "I prefer to think of it as us helping each other," he said. "I get to make my statement, and you get to experience something different. A fresh start, even if it's just for a moment." Amaka stared at him for a long time. She had learned to read people over the years, to spot deception from a mile away. But Michael wasn't lying. He truly meant what he was saying. The question was whether she was willing to play along. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll do it, but only if you promise me one thing." Michael raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "You won't expect me to act like something I'm not," she said. "I don't know how to fit into fancy crowds or pretend to be someone else." Michael smiled for the first time that evening. "Deal." Michael drove Amaka to one of the upscale shopping districts in Lagos, an area she had only seen from a distance. As they pulled up in front of a luxury boutique, she hesitated before stepping out of the car. The polished glass windows reflected the kind of life she had never been a part of. Women in expensive dresses browsed through racks of designer outfits. Sales attendants hovered around them, offering assistance with carefully measured smiles. "This is a bad idea," she muttered under her breath. Michael glanced at her. "Why?" She shifted uncomfortably. "Because I don't belong here. I don't even have shoes." Michael looked down at her feet, still covered in dust from the streets. Without a word, he walked around the car and stood beside her. "You belong here as much as anyone else," he said firmly. "Come on." She let out a slow breath before following him inside. Almost immediately, she felt the shift in atmosphere. Heads turned, subtle glances were exchanged. A few customers eyed her from head to toe, their expressions unreadable. The sales attendants hesitated for a moment before schooling their faces into professional smiles. Michael, however, acted as if he didn't notice. He walked straight to a section displaying evening gowns and turned to one of the attendants. "She needs a dress. Something elegant." The woman hesitated slightly before nodding. "Of course, sir. Right this way." Amaka stood frozen as she watched them pull out dresses, gowns made of fabrics she had never touched in her life. Satin, silk, embroidered lace. She couldn't even bring herself to reach for them. This wasn't her world. Michael noticed her hesitation. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You said you didn't want to pretend to be someone you're not. I'm not asking you to. I just want you to feel like you deserve to be here." She met his gaze, searching for any sign of mockery, but there was none, just quiet sincerity. Taking a deep breath, she finally reached out and ran her fingers over one of the gowns. It was soft, delicate, the kind of thing she had never imagined wearing. The sales attendant handed her a few options and led her to the fitting room. When Amaka stepped inside and closed the door, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. A few hours ago, she had been sitting on the street, trying to make a piece of bread last. Now she was about to wear a dress that probably cost more than everything she had ever owned combined. She slipped into the first gown, a fitted emerald green dress that hugged her slender frame. When she stepped out hesitantly, Michael was waiting outside. The moment he saw her, his expression changed. For a few seconds, he said nothing, just took in the transformation. "That's the one," he said finally. She swallowed, looking down at herself. "It feels strange." "You'll get used to it." She wanted to argue, but deep down, she knew he was right. After finalizing the dress, Michael took her to a high-end salon. The stylist didn't hide their curiosity when she walked in, but once Michael made it clear that he was paying, they got to work. They washed and treated her hair, styling it into soft curls that framed her face perfectly. Her nails were trimmed and polished, her eyebrows shaped, and for the first time in years, she felt clean. When they finished, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her face was the same, but everything else had changed. Michael smiled slightly. "Now you're ready." Amaka exhaled slowly. For the first time since this started, she realized something. He was serious. This was really happening. As the car moved through the streets of Lagos, Amaka stared out the window, her mind racing. Everything felt surreal. Just yesterday, she had been sleeping under a bridge, surviving on scraps, invisible to the world. Now she was dressed in an expensive gown, her hair styled to perfection, sitting in a car that probably cost more than everything she had ever seen in her life, combined. She touched the soft fabric of her dress, half expecting to wake up from a dream. Michael sat beside her, his expression unreadable as he scrolled through his phone. He had been calm throughout the entire process, as if this was nothing more than a routine task for him. But Amaka wasn't fooled. There was something beneath that calm exterior, something unresolved. "You're really going through with this," she said quietly. Michael glanced up. "Did you think I was joking?" She shook her head. "Number." "But I still don't understand why." He exhaled, setting his phone aside. "I told you. I need to make a statement." Amaka studied him. "And what exactly is that statement?" Michael hesitated for a moment before answering. "That she was wrong about me." Amaka nodded slowly. She had heard similar stories before. A man gets rejected, becomes successful, and then returns to prove his worth. It was a common tale, but there was something different about Michael's version. His wasn't just about proving Cynthia wrong, it felt deeper than that. So, "You want her to regret leaving you?" she said. Michael smirked slightly. "Wouldn't you?" Amaka thought about it. If she had been abandoned or betrayed, wouldn't she want the person responsible to realize their mistake? Maybe. But something about this felt dangerous. Playing with emotions, especially ones rooted in past pain, never ended well. "And what about you?" Michael asked suddenly. She frowned. "What about me? How do you feel about this? About being part of this game?" Amaka considered his question. She had nothing to lose. If anything, she was gaining something, an experience, a momentary escape from the harshness of her reality. But deep down, there was an unease she couldn't shake. "I guess I'm just waiting to see how it all plays out," she admitted. Michael studied her for a moment before nodding. "Fair enough." The car slowed as they approached a high-end hotel. Michael had arranged for them to stay there for the night before the wedding. As they stepped into the grand lobby, Amaka felt the weight of people's eyes on her again. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. Michael checked them in, handing her a keycard. "Your room is on the same floor as mine. If you need anything, just call." Amaka took the card, still feeling overwhelmed. "This is a lot." Michael gave a small smile. "Get some rest. Tomorrow is the big day." She nodded, but as she entered her room and closed the door behind her, she felt a strange sense of unease. Tomorrow she would walk into a world that wasn't hers, standing beside a man she barely knew, facing a woman who had once broken him. And for some reason she had the feeling that none of them were truly ready for what was about to happen. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more teachable and inspiring folk tales by FE.